most people think they just got to save and save this humongous pile of money. But in truth, you just have to have that money working for you so then you can stop working for it so much. But the truth is, like, there's abundance everywhere, right? We have more than we can even handle. And so you have to switch that mentality. And when you look at money, you got to look at it not just from that standpoint, but look at it from a standpoint of, okay, what's the highest and best use of my dollars? What can I do with these dollars that creates the best return? Not just financial return, but maybe even a lifestyle return too. Right? So what do I do with this money? How can I use this money in my business to then amplify? Well, what's the ripple effect you want to create? What is it that you can do with your time and your money? Not just to get rich and just go live on a beach somewhere and just waste your life away being selfish, but no, like, what could you do to actually make the world a better place?
Welcome to today's episode of Influence by Design. I am your host, Samantha Riley, and today I have a cash flow expert and anti-financial advisor. So I'm looking forward to diving into the topic of increasing cash flow in your business. And Chris Miles, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's such a pleasure to be here, Samantha.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. We've had some laughs in the green room already, so I think this is going to be fun. Let's start off with setting a little bit of context because you call yourself an anti-financial advisor. What was it? Was there a pivotal moment that you just went, like this is it? Or was it just you had a dream one night? Like how did this come about?
A dream would have been awesome. I'm one of those guys that I fall asleep and I never remember my dreams unless it's really scary, right? So if I had a dream, it would have been frightening. No, so it's interesting because I actually intended to become a business consultant. That was my initial objective when I was going to college. But I figured I should have real life business experience before I do that. So I actually took a sabbatical from college. Figured I would go find some business to start, do that for a year or so, and then go back and finish my degree. Well, the first business that came up, took a few months, but the first one that came up that was intriguing to me was being a financial advisor because I figured worst case, I walk away learning about money and investing and that should be useful, right? And even better, I was even thinking about my father, with my dad because he is always the guy that was very cheap, he says frugal, we say cheap. He was he would always save everything, spend nothing. And so he taught me to do the same thing. But he would also tell me that he felt that his job would literally kill him from the stress and just never being able to retire. So I figured, this could be good for me. So I went to financial advising, got the licenses and everything. And after a while, I realized I don't want to go back to college. I think I'm going to stay as an entrepreneur. So I did that. I was a financial advisor for 4 years. And then during the fourth year, that's when my dad said, well, when are you going to sit down with me? So I sat down with him. I flew back home, and as we're sitting down at his kitchen table, the same one where he said, be cheap, Chris, buy everything on sale. We sit down, we look at all of his finances for the first time in my entire life. And I see that he'd paid off all of his debt, including his home. So he's 100% debt free. He'd also stuffed money into his retirement plan as well for decades. And so I'm hoping, of course, that maybe he can retire. In fact, he's hoping that I can tell him, Dad, you're 61 years old, you can retire now. But that's not what he got. Instead, I had to tell him, I said, Dad, here's the deal. If you want to retire right now, you're going to have to die in about 5 or 6 years because that's when you'll run out of money.
Wow.
Okay. Well, what do I do? I didn't hope for that answer, Chris. Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
I don't know. You did everything right. Everything that I teach as a financial advisor, you did it. And that bothered me. And it wasn't just a few weeks later. I'm talking with a friend of mine who he went to go do things like real estate investing. I actually trained him to be a financial advisor, but he quit to do real estate. And so I'm talking with him and he says, Chris, well, my dad and we've partnered on some real estate deals and we've doubled his income as a professor at the local university. I said, wait a minute, you've only been doing this for 5 months. How is it possible that you can double your dad's income? I mean, that sounds too good to be true. There's no way that's possible. He's like, well, Chris, how many of your clients are financially free where they don't worry about money? Well, none. Even the retired ones still worry about outliving their money.
Yeah.
Okay, good job, Chris. How about this? How many of you guys as financial advisors are financially free, not off the commissions you're earning, but actually doing these same investments? And when I really started taking inventory of who was in our office and even people that had been working there since the 1970s, I said, well, none of them seem to be able to retire.
Mm-hmm.
There's your problem. And so I started taking the Matrix red pill, but instead of going into a whole nother world, right, where I see zeros and ones, I went to this
Yeah.
world of like real estate investing, everything else, and realized that I could actually create passive income even if I'm not the one doing the investing. And later that next year, not only did I quit being a financial advisor because I couldn't keep teaching something I couldn't believe in anymore, but now I was doing something where I actually had enough passive income coming in. I was able to retire when I was 28 years old. So I had enough income coming in, I could stop working.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a shocking place to be because I never thought I'd ever be there. And so, of course, 28, any 28, almost 29-year-old that's saying, "Hey, I'm not working a job anymore." People want to know how you did it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
word got around between friends and family and stuff. And so pretty soon, 2007, I came out of retirement to teach people how I did what I did. Even though I went through the recession, went broke, had to dig back out of that hole again, and was able to retire a second time in 2016, much better the second time around.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, I had to keep doing that same thing. So I've been teaching people really how to do that. Is how do you become free, where your work optional, you work because you want to, not because you have to.
I love that. So many people that are in business for themselves do it because they're chasing that financial freedom. But
Hmm.
I've seen a lot of people speak on this where they do earn money earlier, or it can be people that start to go down the route and then they start to lose sight of why they're doing it. They start to feel
Hmm.
unfulfilled or like they're not living their purpose, and then it's all about their money. So, how do you guide them to align like the financial strategies, what they're actually doing with their deeper life purpose so that they continue to stay fulfilled without, you know, throwing the baby out with the bathwater and walking away from the whole lot, which I have seen people do.
Yeah, such a good question because that's the thing. So many people work so hard to get there, and what they realize when they work with us is that they get there so much faster than they expect that sometimes
Mm-hmm.
they're subconsciously sabotage their own results because then
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they get fearful about what's that next step for me. What do I do when I don't have to work anymore? Do I keep working my job? Do I go work on a passion project? Do I go volunteer my services or like go on a service mission or whatever? Like what do I do with my time? And it's scary for people. And it was for me. I mean, because I got there so fast. I was like, wait a minute. What I almost felt like asking the question of myself, what am I going to do when I grow up? Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's really what it was like. I was like, wow, I don't need to work. Now I have this time. So what? And so one of the best questions I have people ask themselves is if money were no longer an issue in your life, what would you spend your time doing?
Mm.
And that was the question asked of me initially too. That really helped me out. But I'll tell you, the answer I gave was kind of a cop out because the answer I gave initially was, well, I'll travel. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember my friend saying, "You're going to travel 52 weeks out of the year."
Right.
Okay, well, maybe not that much. Like maybe he's like, "Well, how much?" He's like, "Well, I don't know, maybe a couple months out of the year." He's like, "Well, great. What are you going to do the other 45 weeks out of the year?"
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, "Well,
Yep.
that's a good question." And at the time, I said, "Well, maybe I'll teach ballroom dancing." Because I was actually one of the US's top amateur ballroom dancers at the time. It's like,
Awesome.
okay, cool. Now we're going somewhere, right? And that's not what I ended up doing, but that kind of got me a direction and a path to go on. And it also kind of it's interesting because when you have that kind of vision and you have that clarity of your vision, it kind of pulls you faster to achieving it too, I've noticed. So I always encourage people like to find ways to express their what I call their divine genius, right? How you can take the
Mm.
combination of your unique abilities and strengths and your passions and your values, and how do you use that in a way that makes the world a better place? I mean, even the whole
Yeah.
fact I named the company Money Ripples, the whole reason I called it that is because, as I've helped people improve their cash flow and create more passive income and things over the years, I realized, I mean, we had over, almost 1,000 clients free up well over $300 million in the last 15
Wow.
years. That's a
That's
ripple
so
effect in and
cool.
of itself.
Yeah.
And that's what I have people figure out. It's like, well, what's the ripple effect you want to create? What is it that you can do with your time and your money, not just to get rich and just go live on a beach somewhere and just waste your
Mm-hmm.
life away being selfish, but no, like what could you do to actually make the world a better place?
Mm.
And that's really where I have people go with their thoughts and their dreams.
I love that so much. I remember talking to a client many years ago, and we
Mhm.
were talking about something similar, like what's your why? And she said, Sam, she said, this is great that we're doing this, but what I really want to do is go and like help stray dogs in Bali.
Mm.
what she was thinking was she needed to make the money doing the stray dog thing. But then, like, once we had the conversation, it's like, well, no, what about we create this business so that it gives you the money to go and look after the stray
Yes.
dogs? So sometimes you need to think outside the square a little bit and think, well, how can this all work together as an ecosystem? So I love that that's what you're talking about, because most people have some other reason that they, or
Mhm.
some sort of purpose, and it doesn't always need to be 1 + 1 = 2. Sometimes it can
That's
be in
right.
different places. Yeah, I love that.
You don't always have to wait till you hit financial freedom to do it either. I had
Right.
one client, he was trying to figure out what to do, and he loved baseball, not playing baseball as much anymore, but coaching it, specifically
Mm-hmm.
coaching young men. And his passion was really tied into not just coaching young men baseball, but he knew that he could use that coaching to help them become like very mature, great citizens, like great young men, like strong,
Oh,
solid young
love
men that
that.
are productive members of society. And so for him, it was developing. It was like it was a passion. And so forever he was trying to figure out, well, should I make this a business? Right. And he went back and forth. And then I finally just asked him, I said, listen, like you're already coaching baseball right now. And he was an amazing coach. I mean, he wasn't a high school coach at all, but he was coaching kind of more of a city league. And he even took that team to state, to in the state tournament even. And he was just like, yeah, like maybe I should get a coaching job or do this or this. I'm like, let me ask you this question. You already have a job. Does that job allow you to be able to coach? He's like, oh yeah, it's a great job. It gives me the freedom and flexibility to adjust my hours if I need to. I said, have you ever considered that that job is not a burden, but a blessing? Because that job is the
Mm.
very thing that allows you to have the time to coach. Not every job will let you do that. So
Mm-hmm.
really, instead of looking at your job as like something you have to get away from and you're trying to go
Mm-hmm.
towards coaching, what if you looked at this job as the thing that allows you to coach, that allows you to
Mm.
fulfill your passions? And he started to see it that way. He's like, yeah, you're right. And I said, you just focus on being the best coach you can be, follow that passion, follow that path. And as he did that, eventually he did get offered like an assistant coaching position at a school. And then eventually he
Mm-hmm.
got the head coaching position, right? And he didn't have to go and be full time or anything like that. But the great thing is he was able to live his passion. And even when I asked his wife, I said, hey, let me ask you this question. Even though he works this job, what's he like in the summertime when he's coaching baseball? She's like, oh, he's on cloud nine. He is the
Yeah.
happiest I ever see him. Like summer times is his time of year. I was like, great. Let's just see how we can get him to do more of that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the thing is that you don't have to wait for financial freedom to be able to do something that you love.
Totally. That does require a mindset shift, right? Because people might be
Sure
listening
does.
to this and going, all right, well, you got to speak to your friend one on one. I got to speak to this person one on one. But people listening might not have that person to ask those questions. So,
Mhm.
what mindset shifts have you found essential for people to transition from financial stress to having this abundance mindset, to having the belief that they can do this, that they can have abundance, that they can create money, create wealth?
Yeah, I always tell people that there's always a 1-2 punch. There's principles and then there's strategies, right?
Mm-hmm.
The principles are eternal. They never change. They're not to be confused with strategies. Principles are things that always work. For example, dollars follow value, right? Dollars will follow value you create for other people. It's always about how you go about solving problems and serving people in a way that money exchanges. And it's not even just about money. Anything exchanges. Even if you're bartering, you can still do that because you're creating value, right? Well, that's a principle. The strategies are different. Strategies can change over time. And I will tell you, strategies are so much easier than the principles, mastering the principles. And that abundance mindset is all part of that. And so I teach people about that there's really three money mindsets you have to focus on. The first one's a spender, the second one's a saver, and then the third one's a steward. Now,
Mm-hmm.
everybody always talks about the spender and saver mentality, but unfortunately, they're both in scarcity. Like the spender always gets the bad rap, right? The spender is always the one that says, it's easy come, easy go. They just blow the money when it comes in. That's why 75% of business owners don't have savings because they're literally
Mm-hmm.
spenders that said, how do I make more money? I'll go into business, right?
Yeah.
And that's nothing bad because it's not that far of a tweak for a spender to become a steward. The problem is the savers are always the ones that are heralded as being like the greatest, example of financial freedom. But that's not true either. In my experience, what I've seen thousands and thousands of people in this sense where they are great savers. They'll, like my dad, right? They don't spend a lot of money. They save what they can, But the problem is they can never save enough. It's never enough
Mm-hmm.
for them. And so they're always in a trap. And I've had so many people reach out to me. They're like, Chris, I have a net worth of $3 million, yet I can't stop working. Why not? Well, because
Mm-hmm.
I have no income coming in from those dollars. I've done everything I was supposed to do as a saver and it hasn't worked, right? So I guess I just have to save more. No, stop it.
Mm.
You're not supposed to just save
Yeah, yeah.
more. It's to be a steward. And a steward does look at things more abundantly. They realize that it's not like a finite amount of money or resources. See, in scarcity, you believe that making money is a result of luck or exploitation, right? Either I have to get
Mm-hmm.
lucky, like winning a lottery, or I have to screw somebody over, right? I have to be somebody who like takes advantage of somebody else or steals from somebody else, and that's how I make money. I mean, come on,
Mm-hmm.
look at Hollywood. Hollywood constantly, I mean, who's the villain? It's rarely ever the government agent, right? It's almost
Yeah, yeah.
always the corrupt, greedy business owner, right? They're always the devil, they're always the ones that are doing it. Instead of saying, wait a minute, I mean, there are some of those business owners out there, but the vast majority of business owners I know I talk to, especially small
Yeah.
business owners, they're all about, I mean, yes, they want finances, they want financial freedom too, but they're there to say, I have something great. I have something of value to offer you, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's what somebody in abundance realized that dollars follow value you create, not luck, not exploitation. They also don't believe in that you have to get in at the ground floor of an opportunity or you're going to miss timing. Those in
Mm-hmm.
abundance knows that the right time is here, the right time is now, and the right place is here, right? It's always a good time. There's always opportunity. There's an abundance of opportunities, more than you can take advantage of. Therefore, you always have, there's always enough and to spare, right? There's always enough money. There's always enough time, right? It's always finite in our minds when we go into scarcity. But the truth is, like, there's abundance everywhere, right? We have more
Yeah.
than we can even handle. And so you have to switch that mentality. And when you look at money, you got to look at it not just from that standpoint, but look at it from a standpoint of, okay, what's the highest and best use of my dollars? What can I do with these dollars that creates the best return? Not just financial return, but maybe even a lifestyle return too, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what do I do with this money? How can I use this money in my business to then amplify? When I in 2020, I was considering opening up a new franchise, and just
Mm-hmm.
diversifying my business investments because I was in a nice stable place in my business. I thought, hey, this money, this is turnkey now. I'm working 5 or 10 hours a week. Yeah, maybe I just start a new business. But then as I thought about it, it's like, I could do this kind of business or I could do that business, but why not if I just take my own resources that I would use for that same franchise or something? Why not just
Mm-hmm.
take that same resource and double down on my own business? Maybe I just create a bigger megaphone.
Mm-hmm.
So I started investing more in my podcast, right? Now I'm in my 11th season of my podcast, right? I started looking at ways to build our marketing channels and start hiring more people to then create a much bigger vision and legacy with what I'm doing,
Mm.
right? So that's what a steward does is what's the best use of these dollars? Now I don't put every dollar in, and that's another myth we want to talk about with business owners when it comes to money, because you shouldn't always be reinvesting your money. But I do put a lot of money in my business, but then I also take profits and I use that to create multiple streams of income, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
I have over $50,000 a month of passive income that comes in, whether I do anything with my business or not. And that's
Mm.
the powerful thing that you can get to as you start to get more profitable in your business, and then use that money to create other streams of income that don't take away your time and attention from the business either.
Mm. Oh, I love this so much. Let's talk about increasing that cash flow
Mhm.
because it's not, I think that when we talk about increasing cash flow, what we immediately think is in our business. But you've just mentioned that it's from different places. Can you start to paint a picture of what this could look like?
Absolutely. So now don't get me wrong. I believe if you're a business owner, your business is your number one investment. So
Mm-hmm.
never take that away. Think of it more like your economic engine, right? Like it's the thing that does produce the income, that can provide the lifestyle, it can provide a lot of things in your life. What I do see happen so often, and if you ever read the book Profit First by Mike Michalowicz,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great
um,
book.
I remember I actually had him on my show a few years back and we brought this up and he says, it's like, here's the thing. If you're always reinvesting money in your business, you're not profitable. You're
Mm-hmm.
literally just spending money in your business. Now, if you create a bigger and bigger business, well, all you're doing is creating a bigger and bigger rat race, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
if you just keep reinvesting and say you get that company up to $100 million, yet you just barely provide a substantial living for your family. So what? What if that business were to shut
Mm.
down? You remember 5 years ago, March of 2020, we started seeing businesses in the US, non-essential businesses get shut down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't want to get to that place where all of a sudden you have all your eggs in that one basket. You're all in, and that's it. And so the ideal thing is be profitable. Yes, invest some money in your business up front when you're starting a new business. It's you're going to invest most of your money back in the business. But as you start to mature in your business more and more, don't make hustle, don't make that a habit. Make it more of a temporary situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hustle in the beginning, but then start to try to back it off. Try to find ways to free up your time, find ways to free up profits. And as you get more mature in your business, take those profits, build up that cash, not just in your business, but outside of your business too. And then that's the cash you're going to use to then invest in ways to create multiple streams of income.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people, unfortunately, because they have financial advisors in their lives, financial advisors, I found out for myself, we weren't necessarily licensed to make you more money. We were
Mm-hmm.
actually licensed to sell you specific types of investments, right? I mean, so
Mm-hmm.
really that's kind of what got me to question everything and got me to question my integrity as a financial advisor because I realized I just had a license to sell. That was it. So, understand that naturally to them, it's like a hammer. To a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? Everything looks
Yeah.
like stock market. Everything looks like mutual funds, annuities, things like that, retirement plans. But what about now? What about preparing for today? And so I'll give you an example. I had one client that, she was a business owner and she's making great money and even has time freedom within the business. So she's now just
Mm-hmm.
managing the business, making like multiple six figures and part-time. But she
Mm-hmm.
realized too, she's like, yeah, but what if something happens? I need to have
Mm-hmm.
multiple streams of income. And so she started doing things, as we were working together. She's like, you know what? I'm going to do things where I buy some things in real estate. And you don't even have to buy a property that you have to babysit. You can literally,
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to buy a property, the United States is awesome. Like, because United States has literally hundreds of type of markets. So when someone says, what's the US real estate market like right now? You can't answer that question honestly. Because the truth
Mm-hmm.
is, well, which market, which state,
Right.
which city or zip code? Because literally they're
Mm-hmm.
all
Mm-hmm.
different. So when
Mm-hmm.
people are like, "Oh, is real estate bad right now in the United States?" No, it is in some places, but in other places it's
Mm-hmm.
not, right?
Mm.
And so she started buying properties that were in other states that somebody else would manage. She started investing in things like oil and gas, and getting paid off of the royalties from that. And the next thing you know, between all said and done, she's like, my whole goal, Chris, is just to have 25,000 a month coming in, where I know I don't even need that business anymore. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
everything for my business is just gravy, right? I had
Yeah.
another woman, she was in her mid 50s, and she actually did the opposite. She she was actually at first when I met her, we met in a business group, and she's like, "You know what? I'm just looking to build my business and grow it." And then the next month she said, "Chris, I changed my mind. I actually don't want I'm in my mid 50s. I don't want to have to keep hustling anymore. What am I thinking?
Mm.
Like I want to back it off." And so she had about $300,000 that she had after her divorce was finalized. She's like, "I got 300,000. What do I do with it?" And so we looked at different things like lending money to real estate investors where you can get paid
Mm-hmm.
10, 12% a year. So think about it. If you lend $100,000 to an investor that pays you 12% or 1% a month, that's $1,000 a month from that 100 grand.
Mm-hmm.
She only needed $3,000 a month. So between some
Yeah.
of the different real estate strategies she diversified into, she got to $3,000 a month. She even sold off her property in the state of Oregon, sold that off. And then because she wasn't going to live there anyways, because her whole dream was to retire in Bali. She wanted to go to
Mm-hmm.
Bali, teach scuba diving every once in a while, but for the most part, just enjoy Bali. And that's where she's been now since like 2017, 2018, I think it's been something like that. She's been in Bali, comes back to the States every once in a while. Sometimes because she has to, her visa, she has to go to Australia for
Uh-huh.
6 months and then
Yep.
come back to Bali again, right? And do that kind of little jumping
The
back and
little
forth.
hop.
But
Yep.
yeah, do a little hop, right? But she loves it. And that's the thing that's so cool is that most people think they just gotta save and save this humongous pile of money. But in truth, you just have to have that money working for you so then you can stop working for it so much.
Mm. You've got, I believe, a wealth wheel system. That sounded like I said
Mhm.
will. I did not. A wealth wheel system.
Say that 10 times fast.
I don't think I can. I can't say it once slow. Um, is that what you're talking about here?
That's exactly it. Yeah. So like we talk about like, shifting your paradigm, obviously, as we just talked about earlier on. And as we do that, start to store up cash. I tell people is get lean, get liquid and get out. Right. And this is
Mm-hmm.
great advice for business owners. Get lean, make sure you're tracking your money, make sure even if you're just using programs to track your money, you got to track it each and every week. Just see what's coming in, what's going out, and pay attention. Don't look at your balance. That's not the way to do it. That's how people go broke. But start seeing how much money's coming in and going out, and make sure you have surplus, right? You have profit in your business and profit at home. Well, that's getting lean. Well, getting liquid means, how do I make sure I don't lock my money away in prison? So for example, like I had one client that she's in Australia, and she's got a first, second, and a third mortgage on her house. And we're trying to see like ways, like, hey, are there ways we can pay off the debt? And they're like, nope, you can't. You have to pay off in exactly this, prorated way. Okay, well, that doesn't work. All right, well, can we do something else? So instead of putting money towards a house, paying it off aggressively, can we then take that money and buy other real estate, and specifically in the United States? And so she did, and then she started to generate thousands of dollars every month, right? So we got that money liquid. We got the money out. We couldn't get it out of the house, unfortunately, but we were able to get it out of other places like her stock investments, mutual funds, things like that. Some people just have bank savings where it's laying around. Sometimes it is home equity, or even I get people that say, "Oh, I already do real estate, Chris." I have one client that out of California, he had a property. He had his house and a rental property. And I asked him, I said, "How much are you making on that rental property every month?" He says, "After all expenses are said and done, $200 a month." Okay, not too sexy, but that's good. At least it's not negative. All right, well, how much equity do we have in this property? $700,000.
Wow. And that's just sitting there doing nothing, right?
That's right. Now he had his blinders on, right? He was a very good saver, right? I find this a lot with a lot of my Asian clients. Like, they are penny pinching savers. They will save like half their income. They're amazing. And he was doing the same thing. But his goal was pay off my mortgage of my house and pay off the mortgage of my investment property, and then I'll be free. And I said, well, if you pay off your house and pay off your mortgage of your investment property, how much is that? We figured out it was $4,200 a month, which is like $50,000 a year. I said, okay, well, you realize you can actually sell off this investment property, take that 700,000, invest it in another area of the United States where it's much better than California, and you could be making like $70,000 a year right now, instead of waiting 6 years to pay off your mortgages. Like, oh, I don't know. And he hum-hawed. And then finally he said, all right, let's do it. He did it. He bought most of the properties all in Louisiana. And then what happened? He took the cash flow from those and he started reinvesting that money to buy more properties. And so he was literally, and he's even managing his properties. I didn't recommend him do that, but he thought it was fun. So I'm like, hey, if you think it's fun, then do it. If it's a passion thing, then do it. Well, guess what? He's now, and this is about a year shy of when he would have paid off his mortgages. He's now making over $100,000 a year passively, just from that money he was able to get out of that $200 a month rental. So places like that, that's what I mean. Like, get it liquid and then get it out. Get it out to the places where it can actually work for you better, And that's what's so much fun. I had one client, there were a couple that they came to us because they had 5 million in stocks, mostly Google, Meta, Facebook, stocks.
The big ones.
And they said, we want to diversify. But then as we look at their cash flow, we said, well, let's put it all together. Let's look at the cash flow. Let's look at everything. Found out, I said, well, look, you've got some equity in your house and you've got some of these loans. Let's cash out refinance. Let's pull out the equity of your home to pay off all these other loans so that really your house is your one debt, but you'll free up $3,800 a month. That's like $45,000 a year. I was like, that's zero out of pocket, and you can free up $45,000 a year, right? And I said, oh, you're not done yet. You're business owners. What if we got you with our accountant, and have you start talking with them about ways to save on taxes? They did, and they freed up over $30,000 a year in taxes.
Wow.
So even with, again, no money out of pocket, still $75,000 a year. And then I said, look, you have a rental property. How much are you making on that? Zero. We net zero per month. Okay, but you got a couple $100,000 of equity. Let's sell that property and then reinvest it elsewhere. So they made another $2,000 a month. So now they're at $100,000 a year that they freed up, and they still have the 5 million in stocks, right? And then we're like, cool. Now you can take the 5 million. Your goal, by the way, was about 20,000 a month. You only need to cash out $1 million of stocks to then make 10% a year, and voila, you're pretty much there. And so it's like, it went from them like, oh, we hope to retire in 5 or 10 years to, oh, we can do it this year. Yeah. You can, because again, we get lean, we get liquid, and then we get that money out.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's quickly talk about the ripple effect of that, because that obviously was amazing for them right then. But how did that transform, and how did that transform maybe their family or the community, or even like leaving money for future generations.
Yeah. I mean, they're just getting started. So I mean, it's getting going, but it's interesting because now they're like, wait a minute, do I stay working in my job? Do I quit? They decide they want to keep working, which is fine. But what is nice is they are work optional, right? So if they did decide, you know what, I just want to take that time and be with my family. I did have one client who actually did that. She actually was in a assisted living type of business for seniors, for senior
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
citizens. And she did that for a while and she made a lot of money fast. But then she realized she's like, for me, like I have two 15-year-old twin daughters. I've only got a few more years and then they're off to college and they're going to have their own life. My time is limited. And
mm-hmm,
so we said, well, let's get you to quit, And so she sold off her share of the business, again, reinvested so that she could do that. And so she's really the last 4 years. Now the girls are adults, but she was able to
mm-hmm,
spend that time with her girls at this critical stage of when they're growing up, right?
mm-hmm.
I had another couple. They're business owners. She had like a direct sales business that she owned, and he was working a 9 to 5 job, or maybe 9 to 9, depending on the day, right?
Yeah, yeah, right.
And and so they were saying, our dream, Chris, is that we want to give our children a different experience. Like we want to homeschool our children, and we want to do it
Mm-hmm,
abroad. We want to be
mm-hmm.
expats, right?
Yep.
Well, I said, okay, well, definitely. If you keep plugging money away in your retirement account, you're gonna have to wait 20 years, and your kids will be old. So
Mm-hmm.
let's see what we can do about now. And so we did. Like we actually end up having them. They end up selling their house so that they can then move. He quit his job. We took some of their other savings and invested it in different types of real estate, and they got to about $4,000 a month. They said, "Well, that's all we need." And she still has a direct sales business that she can do online, part time, and everything, but that now that's become gravy for them. And so
Mm,
they were really happy about, they're like, okay, now we can go anywhere. And they thought, should we go to Costa Rica, Mexico? They decided to settle on Cabo San Lucas in Mexico,
mm-hmm.
and took their kids there because they want to give their kids like a real life experience, something that no kids will get in a public school type of education situation.
Totally.
And so for them, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to raise kids that are more entrepreneurial, kids that are, have a bigger perspective than just a narrow,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
US mindset, right? They want them to kind of open up and see more things. And they're even like going and serving and donating their time, their money to different charities down there. They even connected us with one of them because when we were there vacationing, we said, "Hey, you know any good charities?" They're like, "Yes, this is the one we donate to. You should do it too." And so we went down there and
mm,
donated to that. And so that ripple effect really does, I think, is bigger than most people realize. I know
mm.
my ripple effect is bigger than I realize because, as you have a podcast, you don't talk to most of the people that listen or watch,
No, you
right?
have no idea who they are.
You don't,
There's no
but you
little
just
report that
hope.
comes out with a name.
That's right. Yeah, you just hope that something will stick and land and will help make their life a little bit better. And that's why I
Mm.
don't quit. That's why I don't retire. Even though I'm definitely in a place I could. In fact, in a lot of ways, my life would be easier if I could, but it would not be as fulfilling as it is right now.
Yeah, and just what I was about to say then is easy isn't fulfilling. When it's
Yeah.
easy, there's no fulfillment. So I
Mhm.
love that. I love those stories that you've been able to change people's lives in so many ways. For people that are listening that have just gone, wow, like you've blown my mind. I've got all of these different ideas. Where can people go to learn more about what you do, get more value bombs from you?
Yeah, just remember Money Ripples, whether it's moneyripples.com, at Money Ripples on social media, or even our Money Ripples podcast that you can follow on Spotify, Apple, or even on YouTube.
Mm, love that so much. Chris, it's been great to chat. I'd love to know what is one thing that you really want to leave people with so that they walk away from this podcast and actually do something, like take the next step, take some action. What would that be?
The biggest thing is that I think there's more hope than you realize. Like the one thing in common with all these people, I mean, some of them thought, okay, I think I have, like, people just have money sitting around is one thing, is when people don't realize, like, wait a minute, am I sitting on acres of diamonds that could actually be doing something better? As an example, I had a client, Dan, that he retired from the military as a colonel, and then he's had $1 million. We got him to, he was looking for answers because he didn't want to live on less cash. He was able to invest in making over 100 grand a year. He just passed away a few weeks ago. He was 64
Mm.
years old, very young still.
Oh, mm.
But that 4 years that he had, like, had he just listened to his financial advisor, he would have been working to this day. But the fact that he was able to free himself and have those last 4 years spend more time with his family, work on passion projects. He loved dealing with the forest service and things like that. That is what I want to have you stick in your mind, is that it's not just about having that potential, it's taking that potential and acting upon it. That's when your life becomes better, right? It's not about being a hearer of the word, it's about being a doer. And that's when your life changes.
Love it so much. So definitely, if you're wanting to take that next step, definitely go and listen to Chris's Money Ripples podcast. Get some more ideas, really, so that you can take the next step. Chris, thanks so much for coming and sharing with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's been such an honor. Thanks, Sam.